Easter. It's officially Good Friday. We love Good Friday. Um, I have done a lot of kind of work with uh, trying to figure out exactly what it is, what its roots come from, and how it kind of works. It's been a bit confusing, to be fair. The reality of it has been a bit confusing, to be fair. Um, but I kind of think I've got it figured. Well, at least I hope I have. Anyway, um, the realities of Good Fridays kind of comes and goes. The whole Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday thing is definitely a Christian naming. Um, but everything starts from the Jewish Passover, or it's called Pascha, or from what I can tell, Pascha. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's spelled Pascha. Um, Now, Jews have been celebrating Passover way before the crucifixion of Christ. It's celebrated on the 14th of Nisan. Now, I looked it up. I had to. Nisan is the first month in the Jewish calendar, and it's typically in either March or April. That is really important because that is a massive reason why Easter moves. It's a massive part of why the whole concept of Easter moves, because the reality is the fact that Nisan can either be in March or in April, it means that there's no set time frame. So on the 14th of Nisan, the Jewish people celebrate Passover. And it's to do with the first full moon. It's the first full moon after that we celebrate. We as Christians celebrate the resurrection, Easter Sunday. So that is super important to understand. So the Passover is it is the basis of the whole thing. Christ's death and resurrection, crucifixion, and then resurrection happened in 30 AD. The earliest known recordings of the celebration of Easter happened in the 2nd century. The church, from what I can gather, the church actually. I need. No, I need this. Okay. No. Okay. Now the Jewish people, when they celebrated this, they celebrate their Passover on the 14th of Nisan, so they celebrate that. But the observation of the resurrection of the resurrection of Christ, that happens on the 16th. They don't care what day of the week that falls. It doesn't bother them. The day of the week doesn't bother them. All that matters to them is their Passover. That is the most important to them. The 16th of Nisan is their celebration of the resurrection, and it is important to them that they celebrate it, but it's celebrated any day of the week. It is Christians, it is the church that decided that we would celebrate it on a Sunday. which is the first day of the week. Okay, that is what happened. Okay. Now, when the church decided this, they decided it would happen after, it was a decree that I found out that the church decreed that we would celebrate the resurrection after the first full moon and from the 14th of Nisan and after the spring equinox. So Easter, they decreed this. It was a massive sort of thing, and they declared that Easter would fall anywhere between the 22nd of March and the 25th of April. Then they accounted for the Julian calendar, which I did address in another video about where we stood with the calendars and how they were created. The Julian calendar, they then used that to create and decide how and when Easter would fall and the weekend it would fall on. They had this month kind of thing in which to move it around. So they had between the 22nd of March and the 25th of April to manoeuvre Easter. But it is a very, very, very much a religious celebration. Not so much a not so much a pagan one. It started off as purely Jewish, as Christians integrated into it through Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. The church then took it over and took it up. But then something very interesting happened from what I can gather. By the 8th century, a monk named Bede, I think that's how you pronounce it, it said Bede, that is how it's spelled. Now, he was English. He was an English monk. Now, I am not quite sure how or why he kind of comes into this, but he actually did have this whole kind of thing that he did kind of work into it. But he actually he noted in his that in April there was, in the more Anglo-Saxon world and in Germany especially, it was what was called an Easter month, or an Easter month, EOSURMONATH. I can't pronounce it. Another word for it was Easter. EOSTRE. Right? It was named after the goddess Oster. She was the goddess of spring and fertility. And he actually wrote that in pagan festivals, during the spring equinox, and it was during spring equinox, so this had actually nothing to do with with the actual Easter celebrations, but during the spring equinox itself, that the goddess became assimilated into the Christian celebration. So it wasn't until the 8th century that this kind of happened. Now, the spring equinox was celebrated through the ages and had nothing whatsoever to do with Easter. Easter was purely Passover and that Passover weekend. That's what it was. When the goddess Esther kind of assimilated herself into the celebrations in the 8th century. Other things came in because she had almost like, I call her a psychic, there's another word and I can't think of it. I'm sure you'll all help me later. But like a little creature sidekick called like a bunny or a hare. Now, it is a hare more than a bunny, but they do put bunny there, but it is a hare. The hare was revered and worshipped as a symbol for fertility and abundance. It was her little creature, her little psychic creature. Other than that, there was nothing other than that could be classed as it wasn't there was no, it's the only reason that we have bunnies as such assimilated into the Easter celebrations, because of the goddess whose actual creature, pet thing, was a hare. But in 1722, that also became a massive part. See, because in the Middle Ages, things like hare pies I didn't tell you, did I? In a little town in Leicestershire, in Anglo-Saxon England, the hare was so revered and so worshipped that on Easter Sunday, during the Middle Ages and right up until present day, they actually do bake hare pies. It's very strange. Like I said, trying to sort of work this all out has been a bit kind of very all over the place. But yeah. But in 1722, it was in 1722 that we get things like the Easter eggs. Easter eggs became a symbol of new life in 1722. And they were painted eggs and painted in all sorts of places. And all they were, the church decided to make an explanation of them as they were just a symbol of new life, and an explanation of the resurrection. So they again were incorporated into the celebrations that we all know today. It is actually quite impressive that this kind of happened, but it is because what used to happen is that at the end of Lent, they would boil these eggs, they would decorate them, and then after Mass on Sunday, they would then eat them as a way to sort of end the fasting. And that's what they would do. So yeah, that's how it all kind of collates together. As I say, this one was really difficult to kind of piece together a bit. And what's really weird is that in places like Poland and in other European places where it's very, very Catholic, that ritual still happens. So at the end of Lent, before Easter Mass on Easter Day, Easter Sunday, they would they will still boil these eggs, decorate them, ready to eat and break the fast with after Mass. It's actually kind of interesting. But it was Germany who innovated the very first sugar paste Easter bunny. I actually never thought that it would be them. I always thought it would be like people like America or us that would do stupid things like that. But it was actually Germany. They made a sugar paste edible bunny. They were the very first people to do it. It kind of caught on right up until you get people like then Hallmark kind of came in with the Easter cards, and it all got commercialised, and then Cadbury's turned up in 1902, I think, and they ended up having a really kind of catching on, and we obviously then Easter became completely commercialised everywhere. But yeah, like I said, Easter, trying to sort of really piece together the celebration of Easter, what it stood for, how it worked, the reality of where it came from, was really interesting and really confusing. But the reality is, the way we celebrate Easter started as a Jewish Passover. And with Christ's death and resurrection, made way for Christians as well, who then, instead of overshadowing a Jewish ritual and a Jewish festival, which was all about God, realistically, because the very first Passover happened in Egypt, when God saved their firstborns and took out with the blood of the lamb on the doors, which was their very first Passover, when he sent the angel of death to save them. So Passover has a real special meaning to them. And of course, instead of overshadowing it completely, what it does now is we gave it our own sort of whatever, so we can now celebrate Christ we can celebrate his death and his resurrection, because he did die so that the rest of the world can worship him. Not just the Jewish people. The pagan rituals that followed, that we incorporated into our celebrations, came much, much later. The spring equinox had always been there, but it had nothing to do with the religious festival that we celebrate on Easter Sunday throughout the whole weekend. Nothing to do with it. But the pagan rituals within the Easter weekend came about because of the equinox. They were incorporated because of the goddess and her little pet, little hare, and the symbols that represent it. and it just kind of grew from there. You know, the church loves to incorporate worldly things into religious things. You know, and I think sometimes we forget that just because it's a religious festival doesn't mean that the whole world can't celebrate it. You know, and just because we've incorporated something like chocolate into a religious festival doesn't take away from how serious people take the religious side of this weekend. So for those who believe, for those who celebrate, for those who will pray and believe in God and his death and resurrection this weekend, be blessed, stay safe, enjoy your chocolate. It's not a sin, it's great fun. There's nothing wrong with it. And for those who choose to ignore the religious connotations of this weekend and enjoy your chocolate and just have fun, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having just a great fun weekend and enjoying a load of chocolate. You can do both. You don't need to have a religious reason to enjoy chocolate. This just gives you a good reason to enjoy chocolate. But this weekend is, and always has been, rooted in a Jewish celebration. Always remember that. The Jews are special people to God. Never lose sight of that. So if you are of a religious connotation and you want to take this weekend to pray to God and to remember him and what he's done for us, lift up the Jews in those prayers as well. Okay? And if you want to take this weekend to enjoy a load of chocolate, go for it. Have fun. Enjoy it. All right? I love you all. Have a great weekend.